Check this out. In this new timeline where board games are suddenly gorgeous, Wingspan towers above the rest, strutting its stuff like a linen-textured peacock. From the lovely wooden dice, to the birdhouse dice tower, to 170 unique and charmingly illustrated bird cards, to some sort of magical paper that this rulebook was made out of. Seriously, what is this stuff? It feels like it was made for the Queen. And of course, there is the stance, these nice plastic eggs that work as a resource, but careful, don't confuse them for a mini egg and accidentally eat them. It's fine. This one actually is a mini egg, but you can't have any. Have to get your own. Artist Natalia Rojas, Ana Maria Martinez Jaramillo, Beth Sobel, and publisher Jamie Stegmaier should feel incredibly proud of themselves because Wingspan is a marvel of board game beauty. Every little piece of this game comes alive and gently whispers, "Come play with me." Let's take a look at the rules. Wingspan is an engine-building card game. Fans of games like Race for the Galaxy or Terraforming Mars should feel right at home. During the course of 4 rounds, you'll unfold a player board that looks much like a menu at a Masonic lodge and find yourself in a race for having the best time watching birds. Each round, you can do one of 4 actions. I think I'll have the Ruddy Duck, please. Thank you. The first and arguably most important thing that you can do is play a bird. Each card has a whole bunch of things going on. First, birds eat, and you'll have to pay the right food to play it. Then each card also has an ability that either happens when you play it or activated later in various ways. There's a whole bunch of information like the type of nest it roosts in, its wingspan, and so on that will be referenced by other abilities in the game. And let's not forget the all-important victory points it will score you at the end of the game. Finally, each bird can be a forest bird, a field bird, or a water bird, or even a mixture of a few or all of them, giving you a choice in which row the bird is played. A choice that turns out to be pretty important because these rows aren't just places for your feathery friends to hang out. They are the other 3 actions, and how powerful they are depends entirely on how many birds you've played into each row. For example, if you choose to do the take food action, you'll get a choice of food from the birdhouse. But if you've populated this row with birdies, then your action transforms into take 2 or even free food, accomplishing magnitudes more with a single endeavor. How do I even choose? If I focus on the bottom row, then I'll be able to draw loads of cards, but will struggle to find the food that I need to pay to play those cards. However, if I focus on the middle row, I'll be able to lay lots of eggs, which are not only victory points at the end of the game, but also can be spent as resources to power various abilities. But if I haven't drawn any cards, who's actually going to lay those eggs? Ooh, wait a minute. Oreo. Oh, but my young plucky friend, what really makes this game strut is that choosing either the take food, lay egg, or draw a card action lets you then activate each ability on each bird card in that row. This is where Wingspan becomes a classic representative of its genre of card-driven engine-building games. Each card I play into my tableau becomes yet another cog in the machine, and there's some expected combinatorial potential happening here. Let's say you've got a killdeer in your field bird row. It's a cool bird that skips school and likes to steal an egg, and if it does, it'll draw you 2 cards, which is all fine, but if you manage to place a red-winged blackbird just before it, a lovely specimen that enjoys reading books and walks on the beach, you can tuck one of those stolen cards underneath it to lay that egg right back. Here's the thing, every time I tuck something under a card or place on top of it, be it an egg or maybe even a worm, that is a victory point at the end of the game. So this happy little combo accident just netted me 2 points and an extra card, and will keep on doing so every time I take the lay an egg for a good friend action. Talking of which, one of the things that Wingspan does exceptionally well is not only represent each bird it features with mechanisms, but also lets those like me, who have developed a recent appreciation for these creatures that are not at all foul, learn about them through little tidbits gently printed at the bottom of the card. First of all, whoever named this bird originally is a genius. But look, it makes so much sense. It's a vulture, right? So of course it has a mechanism that lets it feed whenever another predator bird succeeds on a hunt, which is already cool. But what? It projectile vomits to defend itself? I'd like 3 of those as pets, please. I did mention I recently started to appreciate the wonderful world of birds, and that's all because of Jack. Last year, he got trapped in our chimney for 3 days, and when he eventually got out, I nursed him back to health, looked after him so the kites flying above our house didn't get to him until he was ready to take off.
You're not eating anything apart from banana, but you really like banana. There you go.
Such a good boy. So despite this video starting quite silly, I'd love to instill some appreciation for the winged world for those of you who haven't quite yet been bitten by the bug of, I want to say orthodontistry, but as you can tell, I'm not very well equipped to do that. So instead, I asked for some help from the board game world's premium bird expert, Quintin Smith, to lay down some bird facts. Take it away, Quins.
Efka, it's called ornithology. And did you know that crows have a higher brain-to-body mass ratio than humans?
We'll have more bird facts from Quint as we go along, but for now, back to combos. Our previous example was a great illustration of a potential combo, but rarely will things play out so smooth. There is 170 different cards in this game, and you won't start with many. You'll draw 5 initially, but you'll have to give up 1 resource out of your starting 5 for each one of these that you want to keep. Each time you draw a card, you can pick one up from a display of 3 or draw blindly from a face-down deck. This gives you a little mercy of choice, but you'll still be beholden to the whims of fate, which simply means that Wingspan isn't a game where you'll pick a cohesive path of strategy, but will bounce like pinball from card to card, trying to figure out which of these birds is... Oh no, I was about to say which of these birds is hot, but that sets a very bad tone with our British audience. Quick, save me, Quins.
Did you know that eggs are really, 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 really small houses?
Quins, that was very silly. I thought you were a bird expert.
I am a bird expert, thank you very much. I'd like to see you getting an egg. You wouldn't be able to do it because they're small, as I said in my second bird fact.
When you said you knew a lot of bird facts, how many is it that you actually know?
I know loads. I know all. Well, not all, that would be ridiculous, but I know, like... a better question is how many facts don't I know? Because I've got just so many facts.
How many?
I know 1 fact.
Of course. Thank you, Quins. That got a little bit tense there, which is only appropriate because this game, it can get a little bit stressful. Not the kind of stressful where you and your friends will be at each other's throats, but the kind of stressful where there's lots of things that you want to do, but the reality of tight game design will just curb stomp your expectations. At the start of the game, you'll have 8 actions, each a caring parent delivering but a tiny worm to your starving beaks. As you grow, the number of actions dwindles, but by then you feel like you're ready to take on to the skies and soar. The attention of your meager resources will be in constant competition between the engine that you want to build, the current round objectives which score additional points to the best performers, and your secret objective handed out at the start of the game. There's a lot to think about every time you sit down and play, and the wild distribution of cards will ensure that you have a different experience, which makes Wingspan a game I certainly appreciate, but really sadly not one that I love. Let's take a look back at these cards. They are loaded with information, but whereas there's always one element that is dynamic, so much of the rest of it is static. The type of nest the bird roosts in, the number of eggs you can put in it, the number of points printed on it, the type of food it eats, its wingspan. They're all technically things you should consider because somewhere in this game there is an effect that references one of these, but so frequently they just end up being symbols that you'll shrug your shoulders at and play the card anyway. I wish Wingspan had a more cohesive way of tying these elements together. I mentioned games like Race for the Galaxy and Terraforming Mars, and in both of those, even disparate tags have multiple ways to integrate with the strategy and also tell a narrative, even if that narrative is wonky nonsense. I could be a galactic rebel raising an army of resistance fighters, or I could be an environmentalist focusing on supplying Mars with top-grade oxygen. Whereas in Wingspan, your strategy's narrative is at best a collection of a certain type of bird, for example, predators. But unless you have an endgame objective that directly references that type of bird, strategically, it's meaningless. That doesn't mean you can't go a little funky with this game. One of my friends, for example, played cards exclusively with the effect that lets you tuck cards underneath them and only played them to the waterbird row. One that lets you draw more cards, so he kept drawing and tucking, each card scoring him a point until eventually his board resembled something like this. He came second, in case you're wondering, and whilst it certainly amused us, it felt less in the spirit of the game and more just an attempt to push the design towards its limits. But the real problem for me is the variety of effects on these cards, which feels, to borrow a phrase from Bilbo, thin, like butter scraped over too much toast. Yes, there are 170 different cards, but many of them are slight variations of the same card, with maybe a different nest or a slightly different points value, like those knockoff Nintendo cartridges you got in the 90s promising 4 games in one pack, but you load it up and it's just the same game starting at different levels. Of course, many engine building card games can be accused of this, but it feels particularly prevalent in Wingspan, which is a shame because I think designer Elizabeth Hargrave has a very competent design on her hands that feels just a touch shy from excellent. If only more work went into developing unique effects into these cards, I think it could have been my favorite engine building card game. Instead, I have something that I visually and conceptually adore, but wish it didn't feel like it was defeathered. Thankfully, there's already talks of an expansion, hopefully adding a little bit more variety to this game. And finally, there's player count. The box boasts a whopping 1 to 5, and whilst I'm no expert at solo gaming, I can safely say that at 4 or 5, this game is just too slow, and I prefer it at a less crowded table, which isn't to say that Wingspan isn't enjoyable. If you'd love to get yourself a pretty treat of an ornithological, got it right this time, experience, you could do far worse than this gorgeous production. And I think there's a case to be made that having a competent game with such lovely pieces is just good enough. If you're still feeling tied up, however, I've prepared a list of handy recommendations that will hopefully help you make up your mind and perhaps even enhance the experience. I recommend watching John's playthrough from John Gets Games that excellently illustrates the subtleties of gameplay, and if you'd like to find out more about the production of Wingspan, I recommend this interview from our friend Ross from More Games Please with one of the artists, the publisher, and the designer. But if you're strictly looking for a great engine builder, I think the classics will prove to be more engrossing experiences. Finally, if you do decide getting this, I recommend that you play with this website on your phone, where if you enter the bird's name, it will play the sound that the bird makes. Like this one. Or this one. Or this one. Thank you so very much for watching this review, but MPI viewers, I have an exciting announcement. In just 2 weeks' time, no pun included, we'll be launching our third Kickstarter to support another year of board game reviews, but this time, not just board game reviews. There's something exciting coming along. I don't want to spoil it just yet. You're gonna have to wait a couple of weeks to find out what it is. But I did want to say thank you for watching us and supporting us throughout the last year. You've enabled this crazy thing to become a reality, but you've also enabled these I hope you agree, excellent board game reviews. Here's to another one.